These weren't just engines, they were ticking time bombs stuffed under the hood. So fast, so dangerous that lawmakers, insurance companies, and even NASCAR itself had to step in and shut them down. From Camaros with no warranty to Hemis that rewrote racing history, these 7 power plants were literally too powerful for America. And trust me, number 1 didn't just bend the rules, it scared the entire industry into submission. Engine number 7, Buick Nailhead 401. Let's kick off the list with an engine that looked weird, acted weird, and left hot rodders scratching their heads. The Buick Nailhead 401. Built from 1959 to 1966, this motor was decades ahead of its time. Just look at it. Those vertical valves sticking straight up like nails in a board gave it the nickname Nailhead. While every other car maker was copying each other's playbook, Buick went off script and built something revolutionary. The result? An engine that churned out 360 horsepower and 425 pound-feet of torque in the Grand Sport. And here's the kicker. It hit peak torque at just 2,800 RPM. That's basically diesel truck grunt in a muscle car package. Imagine rolling up to a stoplight in 1965, thinking you're about to humble some Buick. Light turns green, you slam the gas, and that Nailhead Buick just launches away while barely touching the red line. Most cars of that era needed to scream to make power. The Nailhead didn't scream, it just shoved. But here's why it got overlooked. Nobody understood it. Hot rodders tried to rev it like a small block Chevy, blew it up, and then shrugged it off as a failure. In reality, if you treated it right, geared it low, kept the revs reasonable, it could embarrass anything on the street. One builder who's worked on these for 30 years compared it to a heavyweight boxer. It doesn't dance, it doesn't throw flurries, but one punch and it's lights out. The Nailhead's biggest problem wasn't performance, it was image. Buick wasn't cool in the 1960s. When an 18-year-old kid wanted to impress his girlfriend, he bought a Mustang or a Camaro, not his dad's conservative Buick. So these incredible engines sat in cars that looked too tame for street racing bragging rights. Collectors today know the truth. Surviving Nailhead cars are rare, and when one pops up, and especially a Grand Sport with the 401, you're looking at serious money. A well-kept example can fetch 6 figures at auction. The irony? All those guys who ignored them back in the day are now kicking themselves as they watch these cars sell for more than their retirement funds. The Nailhead proved one thing: sometimes the best engines aren't the ones everyone bragged about, they're the ones everyone underestimated. Engine number 6, Cadillac 500. If there was ever a wolf in sheep's clothing, it was the Cadillac 500. On the outside, pure luxury. Eldorados, Fleetwoods, even hearses and limos. On the inside, the largest production V8 ever made in America. A staggering 500 cubic inches, making 400 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque when it debuted in 1970. That's right, your grandpa's Cadillac could outmuscle half the pony cars on the block. The beauty of the 500 was that nobody saw it coming. Cadillac buyers weren't supposed to care about performance. They wanted comfort, prestige, and smooth cruising. So engineers snuck in this monster without regulators or insurance companies raising an eyebrow. For a couple of glorious years, you could buy the biggest land yacht on the road and secretly own the most powerful engine in GM's entire lineup. But the fun didn't last. Emissions regulations hit like a sledgehammer, and the Cadillac 500 got neutered faster than any other engine. In just a few years, it went from 400 horsepower to barely 190. It was like watching Superman get stripped of his powers in real time. One Cadillac engineer even admitted, "We built the most powerful engine in GM history, then watched the government strangle it to death." The 500 also suffered from Cadillac's own reputation. Most owners weren't drag racers. They were businessmen, retirees, or families buying a luxury cruiser, so the engines got driven into the ground, often with little maintenance. Survivors today are almost impossible to find untouched, but if you manage to track down a clean, early, high-compression Cadillac 500, you're looking at a 6-figure car, easy. The Cadillac 500 proved that sometimes the baddest muscle car didn't even look like a muscle car. It looked like your grandmother's Sunday ride. Engine number 5, Pontiac 455 HO. By the early 1970s, the muscle car era was under siege. The Clean Air Act was looming, insurance companies were circling like vultures, and consumer watchdogs like Ralph Nader were calling muscle cars death traps on wheels. Most companies caved and started detuning their engines, but Pontiac said not yet. Enter the 455 HO, the last great warrior against the bureaucrats. In 1971, when everyone else was quietly cutting horsepower, Pontiac engineers went in the opposite direction. They gave the HO a 4-bolt main block that could take a beating, bigger valves that breathed like Niagara Falls, and a Rochester quadrajet carb that sucked down 800 cubic feet of air per minute. The result? 335 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque at a time when rivals were limping along with much less. And this wasn't just a numbers car. It could back it up on the strip. A stock 455 HO could rip through the quarter mile in under 14 seconds, even saddled with bias ply tires and a 3-speed auto. For context, that's quicker than some modern V8 sedans with twice the technology. But here's the tragic part. Pontiac diluted its own legend. They stuffed the 455 HO into everything. Trans Ams, GTOs, Grand Prix, even wagons. When your grocery getter has the same engine as your street machine, it loses some mystique. By 1975, the HO was gone, whittled down to barely 200 horsepower. It was like watching Muhammad Ali get knocked out by a bureaucrat in a cheap suit. Today though, a numbers matching 455 HO Trans Am or GTO will set you back more than most people's houses. Collectors know this engine wasn't just Pontiac's last stand, it was muscle's last roar before the curtain fell. Engine number 4, Chevrolet ZL1 427. If Pontiac's 455 HO was a last stand against regulators, Chevy's ZL1 427 was a straight-up middle finger to the bean counters. This wasn't just an engine, it was a factory-built race motor that somehow slipped its way into street cars. Chevy designed the ZL1 as an all-aluminum, big-block 427 for drag racing. It was lightweight, brutally strong, and officially rated at 430 horsepower. But here's the joke. Everyone knew that number was a lie. In reality, these things were pushing well over 500 horsepower right off the showroom floor. That made the ZL one of the most overpowered production Camaros ever built. But there was a catch: price. In 1969, a ZL1 Camaro cost nearly double the price of a standard SS. One buyer put it best: "I could have bought a house, but I wanted the fastest Camaro on the planet." And if you were crazy enough to pony up the cash, you got a car with zero safety net. Because the ZL1 was classified as a racing engine, it came with no warranty. None. If it blew up, that was your problem. Only 69 ZL1 Camaros were ever made, which makes them rarer than a Bugatti Veyron today. Back then, people thought Chevy had lost its mind, but the handful of buyers who got one basically won the lottery. Bone stock, the ZL1 could rip quarter miles in the 11s, when most muscle cars were barely breaking into the 13s. Today, a documented ZL1 Camaro is worth anywhere from $500,000 to over $1 million. That's not just collector money, that's generational wealth on wheels. The ZL1 wasn't just banned by regulators, it was priced out of existence, but it left behind a legend that proved Chevy, when it wanted to, could build an engine that scared everyone else off the track. Engine number 3, Oldsmobile 455 Rocket. Some engines were loud, flashy, and built to grab attention, but the Oldsmobile 455 Rocket, it didn't need the noise, it just crushed you with torque. Debuting in 1968, the Rocket quickly became the heart of Oldsmobile's legendary 442. And here's the stat that made it infamous: over 500 pound-feet of torque at just 3,200 RPM. That's more grunt than most modern trucks in a muscle car. Picture this: it's 1970 and you're lined up at a stoplight against a Challenger with a 446 pack. Light turns green, and the Rocket barely touches half throttle before it walks away. No screaming redline, no drama, just relentless torque. The kind of shove that felt less like acceleration and more like being launched off an aircraft carrier. But that kind of power came with baggage. By 1971, insurance companies had muscle cars in their crosshairs. If your car had 455 on the fender, your insurance premium tripled overnight. Guys were paying $3,000 a year, more than the car itself, just to keep one on the road. For young drivers, it was financial suicide. Add in Oldsmobile's old man car image, and the Rocket never got the street racing glory it deserved. The survivors, though, are pure gold, especially the W30 versions with Ram Air setups. Those cars can fetch 6 figures at auction today. Back then, most owners didn't realize what they had. Engines got pulled, rebuilt, or scrapped when values were low. But now, collectors fight over every last numbers-matching Rocket. The Oldsmobile 455 proved a truth that muscle fans sometimes forget. It's not always about how fast you rev, but how hard you hit. And brother, this thing hit like a freight train. Engine number 2, Chrysler 426 Hemi. If there was ever an engine that made racing officials lose sleep, it was the Chrysler 426 Hemi, nicknamed the Elephant for its massive size and weight. On paper, it made 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. In reality, it was a weapon of mass destruction disguised as a production motor. Daytona 500, 1964. Richard Petty rolls out in a car powered by the brand new Hemi. During practice, his lap times are so fast, the Ford and GM teams think their stopwatches are broken. Come race day, it isn't even close. Petty leads a parade of Hemi-powered cars across the finish line. Chrysler sweeps 1, 2, 3 while the competition gets lapped. NASCAR officials panic. This wasn't racing, it was a demonstration. The secret weapon was the hemispherical combustion chamber. Bigger valves, better airflow, more efficient combustion. It was engineering that simply worked with physics instead of fighting it. Other engines were bringing knives to a gunfight. The Hemi brought a machine gun. NASCAR banned it in 1965, claiming it was too specialized for stock car racing. Translation, it was so dominant, the other manufacturers were threatening to quit. Chrysler's response? Pure spite. They made a street version. For around $800 extra, you could walk into a dealership and order the same engine that humiliated NASCAR. The catch? Price. Most guys couldn't afford it, so production numbers stayed tiny, less than 12,000 ever made across all years and models. Today, those street Hemis are holy grails. A numbers matching Hemi Cuda or Charger is easily a 6 or 7 figure car at auction. The 426 Hemi didn't just dominate racing, it changed the rules of the game and then rewrote muscle car history. Engine number 1, Ford 427 Camry. And finally, the number 1 spot goes to the Ford 427 Camry. The engine's so outrageous that it scared NASCAR into outright banning it before it even had a chance to prove itself. The story begins in 1964. Chrysler had just humiliated Ford at Daytona with the all-conquering Hemi, and Henry Ford II was furious. He gave his engineers 90 days to come up with an answer, or else. Their response? Take the already legendary 427 side oiler block and bolt on single overhead cams, hemispherical combustion chambers, and, get this, a 6-foot-long timing chain that looked more like something from a factory machine than a car engine. The result was pure insanity. 616 horsepower at 7,000 RPM straight out of the box. With dual carbs, it could hit nearly 660 horsepower. In 1964, that's more power than some modern supercars. Mechanics called it the chain that ate Detroit, and drivers who tested it swore it felt less like an engine and more like a controlled explosion under the hood. But NASCAR never let it run wild. Officials claimed it was too exotic for stock car racing, but the truth was simpler. The Camry scared everyone. Rival teams threatened to walk if Ford unleashed it, so NASCAR banned it before it could dominate a single season. Still, Ford found a loophole. They sold Camry-equipped drag cars directly to racers. On the strip, these things were monsters, running mid-8s in the quarter mile with proper tuning. But on the street, forget it. The Camry was so advanced, so expensive, and so over the top that hardly anyone could keep one alive. Today, the 427 Camry is automotive legend, the forbidden fruit of the muscle car era. It proved that sometimes an engine doesn't need a long racing career to become iconic. All it takes is one glance at the numbers, one listen to the stories, and one fact: NASCAR banned it before it ever got the chance to show the world what it could really do.